Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's keep the hit remaining with MMA. In June of 2020, Apple announced that with the introduction of iOS 14, new privacy features would include consumer opt-in for permission to track. In partnership with AppsFlyer, the MMA conducted research with marketers and consumers about the implication of these changes. In this session, Mr. Vasilis will interpret how consumers are thinking about data privacy in light of the April iOS 14 update to a full opt-in system for data users, which other companies are likely to follow. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Vasilis, SVP, Head of Insights and Research at MMA Global.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vas Pakopoulos. I'm the SVP of Research for the MMA globally. It's a great pleasure to be here to share some really fresh insights from an important study that we just released. The topic is very timely. It has to do with data, consumer data, and the state of data maturity. And it's very timely because globally we're at the tipping point around customer data. I mean, there's a number of evolutionary forces like technology, shifts in technology, everything that is happening with government regulations, sort of obviously, consumer behavior changing, cyber threats. All of those different important things are kind of pushing and kind of creating an internal tipping point as well within the organization, within the marketing org. And marketers right now have to kind of manage two different agendas when it comes to data. On the one hand, they have to kind of think about what specific capabilities to build, how to deepen the data usage and kind of protect the quality of the data. And on the other side, they also have to think about how to get ahead of specific challenges that has to do with data security and privacy and compliance, right? So all these important things are right now kind of within the agenda of CMOs. Which is why we actually went and collected input from 100 CMOs and heads of media when it comes to a number of these questions. The end goal was to create a data framework, a framework for data maturity along these two kind of sides of the growth agenda on the one side and the risk agenda on the other side. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a flavor of this in the next 15 minutes that we have together. We're going to be talking about data types and data uses, ROI and measurement and attribution, capabilities and skills, transparency, compliance, security, and data ownership. The full model includes more than 20 variables, and we're going to be releasing a tool. I'm going to talk about that at the end, and you will be able to actually kind of assess the performance of your own company when it comes to this framework. Okay, so I want to start with some high-level findings that kind of create a backdrop for the state of data maturity. And then I'm going to cherry pick some insights across these 5 factors that I kind of highlighted in the previous slide. So the first important thing that I want to say is that as a narrative, as a main theme that is coming out of this study, it looks like data strategy is becoming a C-level priority, right? And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. Progress is not is being made, but it's not being made homogeneous. It's not a linear kind of progression. It's going to see in a few minutes. So let me give you a few data points. A lot of organizations have a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer, 78% specifically. 40% of companies have a Chief Data Officer. 72% of the cases, we see that leadership makes a dedicated effort in data, right? And more than half of the CMOs claim to be very familiar and involved. So what that means is that data strategy is becoming a C-level priority, right? It's not just a thing for like someone like some IT people in the corner. It just becomes a kind of a bigger thing that sits at the C-level kind of table. But as I said before, data maturity is not homogeneous. There's so many different things and so many different moving parts. So it's multifaceted. Let me kind of explain what I mean by that. When we assess the state of maturity of these over 100 organizations, it looks like most of them are in a good place when it comes to compliance. I'm going to unpack that in a minute, but obviously GDPR and CCPA and all the other regulations have driven some momentum when it comes to making sure that companies are compliant. When it comes to ROI, which is another big kind of bucket, things are also kind of promising in the sense that 6 out of 10 companies are mature or are seeing some progress when it comes to seeing a lift in kind of a return on investment when it comes to data. When it comes to data activation, we see that the percentage is lower. So it means that, as we'll see, there's more progress that needs to be made there in terms of both the use cases, but also the types of data, the breadth of data, and the depth of data, but also the quality of data, right? Then we're going to talk about, breaking down silos. Like, how do you bring together the data in the organization? How do you integrate data, right? And what we'll see also in this case is that, half of the organizations, are in a kind of a good position or are getting there to centralize governance and to kind of create the right kind of exchange using the right systems and the right kind of data ownership. But again, more progress needs to be done there. And last but not least, when we kind of assess skills, it looks like there are gaps. Again, I mean, we see that 1 out of 2 organizations are kind of moving forward with some, training in, investing in data science and investing in MarTech. But again, still a lot of gaps kind of exist. So this is kind of a waterfall, right? Where we see that, there's different progress being made when it comes to compliance or ROI and activating data and all that. So again, it kind of speaks to the complexity of the issues and how many different things have to be kind of pursued when it comes to kind of solidifying and implementing a data strategy in the organization. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to kind of go in each one of these areas, and I'm going to cherry pick a couple of findings. Obviously, there's a long report that we have. It's going to be available at the MMA Global website. But in the meantime, I just want to kind of give you a flavor of some of the things that we're seeing. So let's start with the yellow area, which was transparency, compliance, and security. And I'm just going to put it in a sentence here as the main theme coming out of that is that marketers are compliant, but more commitment is needed to ensure that they stay that way, right? So what I mean by that. All of the charts that I'm going to show you have a traffic-like system. So you see there's going to be the green, which is better than the market or better than the average or leading. The gray, which is kind of like middle of the road average, and then the orange, which is improvement needed. So what you see here in this case is that when it comes to compliance, 1 out of 2 organizations, 47%, as you can see here, are not just compliant with today's regulation, but also kind of making sure are putting the right kind of process in place to stay compliant with updated regulation, right? So they have a future looking kind of mentality when it comes to compliance. The others are, for the most part, abiding by recent kind of data regulation, and there's still some small percentage of companies that need to do more work, right? But overall, compliance is, as we said before, it's kind of, most companies are kind of in a good place. When it comes to transparency on the other side, we see that although the majority is more than 6 out of 10 organizations feel that and say that they have the right practices and they are fully transparent, if you are a consumer, in most cases, you need to do some of the digging, because only very, very few organizations actively engage the customers when it comes to how they use their personal data, right? So it's almost like we say the opt-in versus opt-out, right? I mean, you can find the information, there's transparency, but sometimes it's not very easy, or the organization doesn't really engage the customers in terms of making sure that they make the right decisions. Okay, so that is kind of at a higher level, kind of a couple of interesting insights about transparency and compliance. Now let's shift to ROI and measurement attribution, which is another area. And the key theme here is that most marketers are seeing some lift, and I'm gonna show you some results here. But again, I mean, the measurement and the attribution that is kind of supporting this is not perfect, right? It needs to be more continuous. It needs to be more validated. It needs to be more aligned. Now, this is the data points that support the ROI lift, right? So you see that 3 out of 10 organizations say that they see high lift. Almost half, 46%, say that they see some lift. So the vast majority are seeing some results, right, from their investment in data, which is very good and promising. Now let's talk about what type of measurement tools they use. We have used the scale, to what extent you use it extremely to we don't rely very much on this tool. And then you can see that for the most part, most organizations rely on MMM, brand trackers, and A/B testing, which is a more traditional kind of tools, right? And more aggregate tools. And on the other side, MTA and randomized control tests are probably not as mainstream as used as those other techniques, right? So again, MTA and RCT still not used as widely as traditional approaches. I think is the main theme here. Now, when it comes to the measurement process, again, you see the same traffic light here. It looks like only very few organizations measure always. There's a good chunk that say and they claim that they have some consistency in their measurement, which I think is obviously a very important thing. And then, of course, you see that about half the marketers are, recognizing that their measurement is either infrequent or sporadic or not as consistent, right? So there is work that needs to be done here. Okay. Let's shift now to governance and data ownership. I mean, this is the thing about the question here is how organizations are bringing data together, right? Data is sitting in different parts of the organization. So what is leadership doing, and how are we kind of putting the right processes in place or the right governance? The key insight here is that, yeah, of course, efforts are being made, right, to centralize governance. But silos still exist, and silos have been raising for years now. So it's not kind of an easy thing to kind of bring the silos down, obviously. And I think what we also need to kind of pinpoint here is that data systems are also lagging, and there's kind of a need for more support from the top in this case. Now let me kind of show you some data points to kind of bring that to life. This is the chart about governance, right? So you see that, again, I mean, we have more of a 60% that is either like in a good place or in a very good place. So it looks like, progress is being made here to establish governance. The differentiating piece here, again, is to what extent the leadership is involved. So you see that, in 22% of the cases, organization has a dedicated data governance steering committee comprised of C-suite executives, right, who meet consistently. So I think this is an important kind of differentiator. But you can also see here that in many other cases, progress is being made to at least dedicate some specific structures for governance and putting them in place. Okay, so that is an important thing. But I want to kind of build on that a little bit and to say, okay, there's the governance issue on the one side, making sure that you have the right process in place. And then you have the system piece as well. And what you see here very clearly is that more progress needs to be made here, right? Only very few companies, 8%, say that they have completely centralized their data systems into a single platform. And in most of the cases, in many cases, the work is being done to obviously kind of centralize cloud platforms and all that. But as you can see here, a big chunk of the market is still kind of in the orange territory, which means that data is somewhat integrated or they still operate in silos. So there's more work that needs to be done here. So we have two more areas we're going to talk about. One is the data usage and the data types, and what kind of marketers kind of use what do they even mean when they say data, right? And it's interesting that the key theme here is that most marketers focus obviously on sales data and ad exposure data. I mean, what is the kind of the number one thing that is in everyone's mind, right? Is to kind of see if your advertising works, right? So you have to connect those pieces between ad exposure data and sales data. So what I'm going to show you in a minute is that most companies are trying to do that, but more effort is needed to add breadth and depth in this, right? To actually have more expansive kind of profiles of people, and this is to kind of understand the audience profiles and all that, and segments, and of course to build on the quality of the data, right? So let me show you a couple of data points for that. This is the chart that shows the data types, right? Again, green means to a great extent, gray means to a moderate extent, and orange means not so much. And what you see here is that sales and conversion data clearly is the number one thing that most companies are focused on, right? And then engagement data and other exposure data are the other part of the mix, right? So you have outcomes and you have inputs, right? So connecting those things, very, very important. But then other types of data like, psychographic or location or online activity profile data, they're not being used as extensively. Now, what do we mean by breadth and depth, right? To what extent you have the right kind of, you have expansive data sets that are complete and deep. In most of the cases, that's not the case, right? You see that only 3% of marketers claim to be there. Although 44% say that, they're getting there. They're getting to a place where they have largely complete data sets. So again, you'll see that there's a 50-50 kind of split here, with almost 50% of companies being in a decent, good place, and another 50%, needing a lot more work. Now, the last thing I want to talk to you about is leadership, is training, basically, and capabilities. And the main finding here is, again, effort is being made, but gaps exist when it comes to data science and MarTech. And this is very, very clearly here when we see that most companies feel that there is a vision from the leadership to make a dedicated effort to stay up to speed, but not so much to kind of lead the industry, right? Not so much like we're just playing catch up, I think is what we're hearing here from the company. So we just want to kind of stay up to speed. And that translates into specific gaps that we can see here. When it comes to data science resources, we see that most companies are orange. When it comes to MarTech, we also see that more companies are in the orange kind of side of things, and more progresses need to be made in these areas. Okay, so that was definitely a lot to cover. We cover all these 5 areas, but very, very, very high level, from compliance to ROI to data activation to breaking down silos to building data capabilities. The full report is available, and it's going to be actually available on the website, so you can actually go to MMA Global and find the report. Also, what is going to be released in the next couple of weeks is a data tool where you can actually benchmark your organization versus all this kind of average that versus the data set that we have developed. So you can actually, plot your company basically by taking the tool, and you can actually see where you are, where are your strong areas, and where are your areas for development. Okay, so I hope that was interesting. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, and I hope to see you, most of you, kind of downloading the report. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Vasilis, for your interactive presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next topic, I would like to present to you, that is product marketing touch game with win users' heart.